Welcome back to Restless. I'm Father Joseph Gill along with Joe and Lauren. As together we talk about topics that matter in today's modern world. But first of all, shout out to this kid named Ethan who was super excited about Restless and he told me he's going to start listening. So if you're listening, you're awesome.
Shout out.
Shout out, yeah. But I also wanted to, Lauren did a really funny laugh at the very beginning and I want to see if you can replicate that.
Ha ha ha. Is that it?
No, but that's also funny.
I cannot do things on cue. You
No,
know?
it's just kind of
I'm
spontaneous.
Like whenever I say hello and welcome back to Restless.
That was
But
on cue.
That's like our. Whenever they test the levels, I do like this silly voice.
But we love that voice.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
your natural voice. Hello.
Yeah.
So now we mock her. I mean, we
We're
enjoy
laughing with
her
you
presence.
because you're not laughing. But
Right.
We're laughing with you.
I'm usually not.
Anyway, so did anybody see those Olympics this past summer?
I saw a little bit of it.
Did you?
I saw Olympic handball, and I'm convinced that I could be on that team. As I am now with no training, because they don't really do anything. They just stand there for the most part. Did you see any of this?
No.
The defense, it's not man-to-man defense, it's zone defense. So they all, if you're on defense, your whole team just crowds at the goal and stands there. And you dribble the other team dribbles the ball a little bit. They try to shoot, they miss. I could be an Olympic handballer. I think.
Well, I think that's a future in your life.
No, I
maybe.
have too much self-respect, but I'm saying that I think that I think that I could do it. I'm not going to. It's ridiculous.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, there are some sports I kind of question. You know, I know curling being one of the more popular strange sports that's in there. But I'd heard that ultimate frisbee was going to be in the Olympics, but is it not?
The World Organization for Ultimate has worked hard, and they have a relationship with the IOC. But
They probably haven't paid them off enough. They should
Ultimate-
try more bribes.
Well, I heard
That
too
helps
that
it.
America is like the only
is-
country that plays it, so we'd win
No,
everything. Because that's why they
that's
took.
not true.
That's why they took baseball out
I know.
because
Yeah.
we won every single time.
It's
and-
it's not big enough around the world.
yeah.
The hope for a while was that LA 2028 was our chance because the host country gets to introduce 3 sports.
Do they really? I didn't know that.
Every year they introduce 3 more sports. That's why
Did they
Olympics-
drop some
That's
out?
why
So
the
they-
host
host
Olympics are stupid.
Well, I don't know that they all stay, right? Like you may have heard breakdancing is not going to 2028.
That's good.
Right?
I would say that's.
Is
But what-
breakdancing is breakdancing really less of a sport than gymnastics?
Ooh, we're gonna get hate mail for you saying that.
I
Okay,
think
I'm
we
just
should
saying.
not this episode. We should do an episode about what a sport is. I've become convinced that most what we call sports in the Olympics are not sports.
Is
They're
NASCAR? Is
they're
NASCAR a
impressive.
sport?
No, I think a sport requires actual like person-on-person competition where what you do impacts the other person. Basketball is a sport because you're playing against somebody whose skill matters for your performance. Doing very impressive athletic things, totally unaffected by anybody around you, to me isn't really a sport.
No, I disagree strongly.
Okay, fine. That future episode.
Yeah. But anyways, yes.
But
But actually, that's a great segue into the discussion that we're going to have today, which is about one sport that kind of got a lot of notoriety, perhaps for all the wrong reasons, in the Olympics, which was boxing. I actually didn't know it was an Olympic sport. Is that a new thing, or is that
No
always been
idea.
there?
Don't know.
First I heard about it was when I read your Facebook post about it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So apparently it was a thing, and I guess it got controversial because there was a woman that had a chromosomal disability that gave her extra testosterone, and so she was beating this other poor woman to a pulp, and she gave up and wanted to preserve her life. But my Facebook post basically said, everyone's talking about the issue with like the gender and this and that, but let's talk about the bigger issue of, is boxing and those kind of contact sports even moral? And I know Joe has a passionate feeling about it, and so do I. But my passionate feeling is that any sport that has as its direct end, not something that's ancillary, right, like football, but as its direct end, the physical injuring of another human being. Now, with that said, I know that some boxing is about the punches you land and about the moves you make and not so much. But if you're like at a regular boxing ring, it's just basically until you knock the other guy unconscious.
When you say a regular
right?
boxing ring, do you mean at like the gym down the street, or do you mean at professional boxing?
Professional
fight?
boxing, right?
Okay, I think. Okay, yeah. I mean, there may not be points, but
A Mike Tyson versus Vander
Sure.
Holyfield type deal, right?
okay.
I would say that's immoral because it is violence qua violence for the sake of nothing but trying to injure the other person is the point of the game.
Interesting. Okay. I'm not sure that I would agree that violence or injury is ancillary to the point of football. I mean, it's so baked into it. The point might be to advance the ball, but the point is to advance the ball literally through the person standing across from you,
No,
which
but if it's
inherently is violent.
But it is entirely possible to get through a football game without getting injured. I mean,
It's also impossible to get to a boxing match without getting injured.
how's that possible?
I mean, I don't know. I've done it. I haven't gotten injured. If you're good, you block.
But then what about the other? I mean, so your
Yeah.
type of boxing perhaps is different than the Mike Tyson because you're not going for knockouts, right? You're not
So
going to.
I should say at the outset, the reason I care a lot about this is that I've done martial arts for a very long time. So I started martial arts when I was in third grade. I'm now 25. I don't do it as often. I don't have as much time now to do it as I used to, but I still spar occasionally. I still train some stuff occasionally. And I have experience with both boxing and with like kickboxing and with more weaponry-based martial arts and grappling-based martial arts. So I do have a kind of a wide knowledge of this stuff. And
But apparently not Taekwondo,
well, I said martial arts,
which I did for a year and loved very much.
Taekwondo is essentially gymnastics with slightly less silly uniforms, I suppose. I'm trying to think of
It stretched me out very well, yes.
Yeah, Taekwondo. It's not that it's the martial arts community is full of a lot of bickering and pettiness and infighting. But one thing we can all agree on, no matter who you meet, is that we don't care about or respect Taekwondo, frankly. So if you're listening, I apologize. I've met good martial artists who do Taekwondo.
Get another letter about this one.
Yeah, that's fine. But talk to anybody who does martial arts that isn't Taekwondo and ask them what they think about Taekwondo, and then you'll see that I'm right. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
It's fine. I partially joke. I don't mostly. I partially joke. There are good things about Taekwondo.
I think you're wrong, but I think most of this episode I'll think you're wrong. So
yeah, that's fine. I think that it is overly reductionistic to say that boxing is violence qua violence. In part because I've never boxed professionally or anything like that, so I suppose that there might be a different mindset. I think that what some Catholics, and like Father Mike Schmitz is also in this category of thinkers, right? He's made 2 YouTube videos about why he thinks Catholics can't really participate in or watch the UFC. And I think that for those who have never actually been in the position of sparring with somebody, it's easy to look at it and say, well, this is just blood sport. But I don't think it is blood sport. In part because there are actual rules governing boxing to make it safer, right? So you can't hit, I guess, like to the back. They're like actual rules that I've never really had to be subject to, but you're not allowed to hit in the back of the head, right? Even the UFC, there's rules about when you're allowed to kick somebody versus when you're allowed to punch them. So there are rules that attempt to, the boxing gloves are in part to protect the person you're hitting, right? They're also in part to protect your own hands. So there are rules in place to protect people from getting seriously injured. You're supposed to. The reason that like knockout rules exist is because they don't want you punching somebody who's already unconscious or already not fighting back, right? So even if you are actually conscious, if you stop defending yourself, they'll call a technical knockout, right? And they'll stop you from hitting them. All of these exist, to create an amount of safety around a sport which, yes, has as its sort of like mode of operation violence, but I don't think it's violence for its own sake because if those who had the experience of sparring understand that there's 2 stages to the life of somebody who does a combat sport. There's the I'm going to die phase, which is when you're afraid to get hit and you think every time you get punched, it's the end of the world. When that ends, when you realize that you can survive a punch to the face and it's not going to be the end of the world, you enter the chess playing phase, which is you discover that what I'm actually doing here is not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to bait you into letting your guard down. I'm trying to set a trap for you to fall into. I'm trying to outsmart you.
I don't deny that there's strategy. Absolutely. It's not just like a haul off on the other guy.
Right.
But even, strategy, there's strategy in gladiator fights too. I mean,
right. And
strategy alone does not make it moral.
But why were the gladiator fights immoral?
Because they killed each other?
Okay, yeah, because they killed each other. The aim was to the death, right? So if you recreated the gladiator fights, except for it wasn't to the death, right? It was not to the broken bone, right? It was like with weapons, but they're dull, so they're not going to hurt each other too badly. And yeah, you're going to get some bruises.
Well, it's
and
called fencing.
Injuries. Well, but
fencing's fine,
something
right?
a little bit more, dangerous than fencing, right? Like they have martial arts where you kind of wear this extremely, like dense and protective armor, and you basically fight with swords and stuff. Like, so you look at that and you say, okay, well, this is fine.
Maybe pool noodles are fine.
Maybe. My point is that the reason that gladiator fights were bad is because they were to the death, and because it was people watching it and like cheering for and hoping for and participating in the murder of people. But that is not what boxing is.
Okay, so let's say that death is not the standard, right? So obviously, boxing would not desire the death of its member. Would you say that the standard is broken bones? Should we
No, but that's also
cheer on someone else who's purposely trying to break someone else's bone? Should we purposely try to cheer on someone else who's trying to give someone else a concussion?
Well, I think that there's a difference between what you're trying to do.
Feel free to chime in at any time, but Lauren.
So like,
sitting here.
So like, take the broken bone thing for example. If you were in the middle of a jiu-jitsu grappling match, if someone's doing an arm bar, right, which is when you try to hyperextend the arm past the point where it's supposed to go, right?
Ooh, ow.
If that action was taken to its completion, it would break the bone. But when you're watching it, when you see, like, my dad has a black belt in jiu-jitsu. When I was at his black belt test and I saw him about to pull an arm bar, I didn't start cheering because I thought he was going to snap the guy's arm in half. I started cheering because I knew he was going to pull the arm bar, the guy would tap out, my dad would get a point or get credit for that. So when I see if I'm watching a sparring match and I see someone punch the other person, I'm not like, yes, brain damage, right? What I'm cheering for is like, yeah, you scored a point, you did your thing. Now, I also taught martial arts for a long time, and one of the things you have to teach kids from the very beginning is there's a range of power available to you as a person, and you are never sparring at 100% with your opponent. Now, maybe in a professional boxing match they are, and the stakes are higher, but they're also professionals who know how to take a punch, know how to block, know how to dodge, right? But for kids, they're like, all right, you're operating right now at 40%. So if you hit somebody, you're not going to be causing serious damage, right? It's a way, it's a way of keeping score, frankly. And same way that you're not trying to break someone's bone if you've got an armbar on them in jiu-jitsu. I don't think you're trying to give somebody a concussion just because you punch them.
I'm currently looking up right now. How many people have died during boxing?
Okay.
So
look up football next.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. And it says that over 2,000 boxers have died in the ring.
And how long, though?
From 1720 to 2011.
Okay.
There were 1,865 deaths. And now, a decade later, this number has surpassed 2,000. So.
Okay. So we shouldn't do dangerous things, though, then, as Christians.
Well, but that brings up a great question, right? So my dad used to whitewater raft quite a bit. And on a certain time, I guess he got thrown overboard from the story I remembered. He got pinned under to the point that he almost drowned. And when he surfaced, he was kind of like, I've got a wife and kids. Like, I shouldn't do this dangerous thing that could potentially lead to my death. So, I mean, even something like free solo climbing El Capitan, or one of those great mountains.
Yeah. Driving your car.
Driving my car the way I drive.
Sure.
Yes,
driving near your car.
Driving near my car.
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of risky activities. And I agree with you that the responsible adult has to be able to say, like, this activity is too risky for me to do in my current situation of life. I think that's a very important thing.
Right. So at what point does taking that risk or putting someone else in that position become immoral? What are your thoughts?
Lauren, answer the conclusively for us.
Well, if you don't lack ignorance, right? So if you know there's a high likelihood of risk, that's probably immoral, right?
So if you take an act that you know is highly risky, it's immoral.
And you do it anyway.
I would say,
or if you avoid the precautions that you know would help you, right? Like speeding, but in a, I don't know, 2-lane highway like the Merritt with curves, not wearing your seatbelt on a rainy day. Like you're taking excessive risk. Like it's one thing to speed, but depending on where you are, how fast are you actually speeding, right?
And I would say what the reason why, right? If your wife's going into labor, then that would be a legitimate reason. But if it's just because I want to get there 5 minutes faster,
I was talking about more like a guy speeding for sport in his sport car.
Oh,
right?
Sure.
For like the thrill of it and the fun.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about activities like whitewater rafting or climbing.
So what about someone who's like free climbing just for the glory? Is that a legitimate reason to risk your life?
Do you have all the safety measures in place?
Well, by definition, free climbing, there are no safety measures except for maybe a helmet, right?
You're literally just walking.
There's no rope
cliff
holding you
with hands, which is
so
crazy.
I don't know much about that, but I know some guy has done that in some impressive way. But
I think it's all impressive.
That was very vague. Some guy, someplace, some mountain, I don't know. With something.
I'm not a climber, and I'm not into this.
Yeah.
But could he not have done the route first while he was attached to the mountain?
He probably did, and he studied the route.
Precisioned each move.
Yes,
and so he knew it, and he had strength, and he was in full health, and he was well rested, and then he did it.
But still, it's a totally superfluous activity. There's no need to do that, right? So it's
right.
It's a risk taken for its own sake.
Maybe that's his job, though. I mean, he could be sponsored by the North Face or whatever.
Well, that's hard because men have different thrills, right? For some, it's speed. It could be skydiving. It could be scuba diving. It could be boating.
Right, I agree with you. I'm trying to undermine Father Joe's point, right? Which is that you can't just say, well, it's risky. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, but again, so are a million things we've all done today. You know what I mean? It was risky for me to answer a text while I was, on my way here, right? Like,
whoa! You admitted that? Just like people like listening.
Yeah, I know. Well, whoops, sorry. I'm not a perfect person.
That's right.
But we all take risks. We all take calculated risks. It's risky to go over the speed limit. It's risky to drive at all. You know what I mean? It's risky to do all sorts of things that we do.
Right.
That we don't have to do.
Well, but I think we're going back to moral.
And I think there's a judgment call, right? Because I don't think it's always clear as to what risk you should take or not take.
I don't know. I think most of the time you probably know,
Do
right?
you?
Like, are you like the free climbing, right? Have you done the preparation to make it as safe as possible? Yes. Okay, then. If you haven't, then it's a dangerous risk and it's foolish.
What are your other responsibilities, right? If you've got a wife and kids, that would be probably different than if you're a single man. Are you doing it because it's your job and you get paid, or are you doing it just for the heck of it?
So that's okay. So I guess let's like narrow down what we're actually talking. So is your contention that professional boxing is too great a risk to be a moral activity to the participants?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because they could die, because they could get seriously injured. Because like my dad has had some serious injuries from jiu-jitsu, where if he were somebody who worked with his hands, that would have really affected his livelihood. You know what I mean? So, but I think, I mean, you said to me in our sort of pre-show conversation, we think the martial arts are morally acceptable. But I mean,
there's, I guess there's two issues. One is is the risk acceptable? That's one thing. But the other thing is going back to it, that I do think the nature of boxing is one of intentional violence.
Right. But you think the nature of martial arts is what? That's distinct from intentional violence.
It's more of a point score. Is it not a point scoring system?
Not every martial art, not the ones I do.
Then in that case, I would agree that that's immoral.
So like the martial arts, one of the martial arts I do is called Kali. It comes from the Philippines. It's their tribal way of fighting. So it's all rooted in weaponry, and it's all about, not that we're like going out killing each other or something like that, but it's, because we use training knives or whatever. But all the training is about where you'd stab them that they would actually die, how to take a knife and stab them back with it.
Okay, so that's like for safety, right? Because you're not actually practicing that on another living person, are you?
No, but I mean, if I was attacked with a knife, it would become practice on a living person very quickly.
And that's self-defense. And if I was attacked by a person, I would probably punch him in the face, much like a boxer would.
But how do you?
But that's a big difference between I'm deciding to enter a ring so I can purposely injure you.
But I don't think the purpose of boxing is to injure somebody. I think intentionality matters here. I don't like. Yeah, I mean, look, if you were like the pre-show interview, they're probably like, yeah, I'm gonna destroy him or whatever. But I mean, like, is his mind like, I'm gonna give this guy a concussion? I would be surprised as most boxers. I mean, I've had like,
How else do you win? By getting the guy to give up. By beating him so severely that he can no longer continue.
Yeah,
right.
I suppose that's fair.
But
so even if you're
matched,
what's that?
That would be less likely, right?
I mean, also boxing matches do go to decision sometimes.
Opponents,
right?
Well, then one of you is going to leave injured. I mean,
well, so I think
or you get a technical, tie.
So either it ends in a knockout, right, or the judges, or you last all the rounds and the judge has to go to decision.
Yeah.
So you'd say wrestling is not like the fake stuff, but like actual wrestling is moral because it's not what
can both people walk away? The whole point is to pin someone. That's very different than injure someone.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I don't.
I mean, imagine that there was a sport in which two people were going to have a knife fight in a ring. Would that be moral?
Like with real knives?
With real knives. Yeah.
I would say no, because there is literally no way to do that without seriously injuring somebody.
So is there a way to do boxing without seriously injuring someone?
Boxing,
no.
Boxing might be the toughest case. I mean, that it sounds like what you're saying is that UFC would be more moral than boxing, because in the UFC you can tap somebody out, which just doesn't really injure them if it's done correctly, right? So I could choke somebody out in UFC, which is actually a very safe way to
That's making them unconscious.
No,
I don't know. I don't understand.
No, so the point of tapping out is that and we always tell the kids is you don't, like, if someone's submitting you, right? So they're doing a joint lock or they're choking you, you don't tap out when it starts to hurt or when you start to lose like consciousness. You tap out when you tap out when you feel the pressure. So if I'm doing an arm bar, I don't tap out when my arm is like, back towards my shoulder, right? You tap out when you start to feel the pressure of the arm bar, and you tap yourself or the person, you say tap, and it gives them the response and they stop, right? So in the UFC,
well, that would be very fine. Yeah, that'd be totally fine. Because that's more like wrestling, I believe.
Well,
it's just wrestling with a lot less rules, perhaps. And more freedom to kind of do.
I don't know.
More freedom to do more moves.
The UFC though is half of that, and it's half striking, right? So
well, then the half that's more like wrestling is fine.
So you think the half that's striking is inherently immoral?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. Like it's there. Yeah.
Did you see Jesus in a boxing ring?
The loser probably does, actually. If he's
the
unconscious,
devil does.
So it's interesting. So in preparation for this, I took the extraordinary step of doing some research.
What?
This is the first time for everything.
Yeah,
and so I googled a little bit, The church has said nothing on the question. First of all, it's worth noting.
Hmm.
Even Pope Francis actually did publish a lengthy document about sports, and I did skim it, and there was no mention of combat sports of any kind.
And there is that great movie, Bells of St. Mary's, wherein the nun teaches the little boy how to box.
And there are famous priests who box.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of interesting, I don't know if it's interesting, I didn't read it, but interestingly to me, there's a lot of commentary about spiritual lessons one can draw from boxing.
Well, St. Paul uses it as an example, right?
Right.
I don't shadow box, fights the good fight.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. It seems to me that, I take seriously your point that the point of boxing, that the boxing is likely to end in injury. I guess I just don't necessarily think that makes it inherently immoral. I don't know, because the point isn't to kill somebody, and it's not to I don't think it's to give them a concussion either. And if we could demonstrate that there's no way to have enough headgear or something like that.
Well, if you can tell me that the point is not to injure the other person, and that has nothing to do with how you win, but you can't tell me that. So
no, I mean it does, but I guess I'm just not. Right. It's not obvious to me that makes it inherently immoral.
The way to win is to injure another human being.
But is that immoral if the other person is freely putting themselves in that position, and they're also very well trained?
Well, the church has forbidden duels to the death, right? Pulling guns on each other. Mm-hmm. And actually, before the current Code of Canon Law in 1983, you were forbidden from a Catholic funeral if you died in a duel. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. So freely entering into something that's intrinsically violent, one that leads to death.
Yeah, wait a second. Yeah,
is not
that's
one that leads to death.
Yeah.
is clearly forbidden by the church. Clearly.
Right, but what's actually
to the freedom, I don't think really matters whether someone.
You're shoehorning in here something here though. The point of that, I think, is to prohibit somebody from consenting to solving a problem by flipping a coin whether they die or not. That's not the same thing as boxing. Not just because it's less likely to end in death, because it's like dueling is not. It was a way to settle disputes. It was a way to settle disputes outside of the law. Right. It was a matter of taking justice in your own hands and playing fast and loose with the gift of life. I don't think that's the same thing as boxing.
Okay, so let me give you another example, right? Let's say two boys in school are having a dispute. Instead of fighting immediately, they say, let's just solve this out on the playground. And they go out back and they start punching each other. And the one that gives up loses the dispute. Mm-hmm. How is that in any way different than professional boxing? And would we agree that that's an immoral way to solve a dispute?
Well, one way it's different is that the thought experiment you propose is an example, again, another example of two boys trying to circumvent actual channels of authority to solve a problem. So, if two kids in school, if one bullies the other or something like that, the proper way to resolve that is to go through authorities. All right, let's say that being said, is there an efficacy to the bully, to the kid being bullied, turning around and knocking out the bully?
And let's say the dad says that. Dad says, "Oh, go ahead, son. Just take him out back and stand up for yourself."
But take him out back. That's divorcing the conflict from its context, right? So if I had a son, and I taught him martial arts, which I would if I were to have a son, and some bully was picking on him, and like in the midst of that violent encounter, my son hit him back, I don't know that I would have a problem with that. If he then said, all right, let's schedule a time and a place once the blood is cooled to go and beat each other up, okay, then that would be a different story, right? There's there's a self-defense aspect to the one.
Right, so self-defense is totally fine. I'm not in any way against that.
But this is your analogy. I just don't think it holds up to the actual thing we're talking about.
When I was in 6th grade, I threw a dictionary at a kid because he was flicking my ears all day long.
That's funny.
Yeah, he got him to stop.
That may have been a disproportionate response.
That's a weird thing to do to somebody.
It was the largest object I could find.
No, flicking ears.
Oh, yeah.
That's a more normal response.
I have kind of big ears. I don't know. Kind of
so he was making fun of you?
Oh, he'd sit behind me in class and just boop, boop, boop every day. Just
so before you were homeschooled?
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I got homeschooled. It was my
mom.
Little brother.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
But so I think your thought experiments, it seems like are you trying to undermine the point about consent, that consent, because I agree that consent alone doesn't make boxing moral. But boxing is a test of strengths against another man. It's not attempt to settle disputes. It's not fueled out of enmity of any kind. It's not fueled out of enmity of any kind.
So that seems
it's purely divorced from emotion.
Just for enjoyment?
Well, it's any sport is.
So yeah, but would that be all right if two boys were like, hey, let's beat the crud out of each other just for kicks, for the heck of it?
Well, are they in the same?
I've done it. Like, I don't know.
I did too. Me and my brother one time to toughen each other up. I remember it was like December. We went out to the garden, which was all like fenced in, and we said, all right, we're taking our shirts off. and we started throwing baseballs at each other's
That's
chest.
stupid.
And we're like, tough it up.
But like well into adulthood,
Boys,
I was
they do stupid
yeah, I was
things.
taking a Muay Thai
Amen.
class, and I was with a
Amen.
guy who was younger than me, and he was like, "Hey, why don't just we were doing like a drill where it's just like throw the same 3 punches, you do the same block." It was kind of like one of these mindless drills. He goes, "Hey, why don't just like go as hard as we can?" I was like, "Sure, why not? I don't know. Let's see what happens. We're blocking. We know what's happening."
And
it was fine. After a few minutes, I was like, "All right, I've had enough of that. Let's go back to doing this with control
okay,
again."
and nobody got injured, right?
Right.
Right. So, but if it was like, okay, let's just throw as many punches as we can until you are unconscious on the floor.
Yeah, but
Would that be different?
it was different from that's different from what boxing
How
is.
about this? If the goal of boxing or the way you win was only through a knockout, that would be immoral. But it's not.
That's probably. I mean, I guess to be honest, I don't know enough about
Right.
boxing. It
And-
seems
and
like
to
it seems
be
like
honest,
it's the
Lauren, I'm a
primary.
little surprised that you're taking Joe's side in this. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little
Should tell you a
surprised
lot
by
about whose side is correct.
that. I really, I can picture
Okay,
Lauren
and
in the
I have-
ring right now.
I have another thought too. Like when you're saying injure, okay, so you get a black eye, but
Yeah,
you
big
recover
deal.
from it. You know, and then to go back to your point, like in football, I'm pretty sure 100% of football players get injured. You
I would-
cannot
I would
avoid injury,
Probably
right?
guess that
and
most
what,
of them do. Yeah.
what are the levels?
And by the way,
Bruises?
lasting brain
Pretty
damage.
awful.
I mean, yeah, like
Oh,
I will concede that there's a term called being punch drunk for a reason, right? Which is that there's a amount of brain damage that can be caused by being punched enough in the head.
Right.
So I'm willing to say that
Now they call it CTE, right?
right. So I'm willing to say that there is a limited season, right, to how long someone can safely box.
So,
But
no.
but how do we know how long the season for football players?
So okay, so maybe I won't kill the other guy, but I'm going to make it so that he's going to have an injury for the rest of his life.
But that's not the
right.
goal of it.
Right.
That's how I win.
No.
No, you don't win because you injure him. You win because you beat him in a fight. The
Because I
injury.
beat him in a
Yeah,
fight
but-
physically, right?
Right, but then you can recover from these. They're not. It's not like you have a black eye forever. Your face.
Right,
know, it's
but
broken
I
forever.
could give you such a concussion that you have brain damage.
Right. Well, that's the risk they're taking by entering that sport because you know it's more dangerous. I would say too, you have that risk in football, even in
football
our
too, yeah.
sport of ultimate frisbee. I know a number of players who have stopped playing because they got too many concussions.
I know our
and
friend,
it's a
our friend
non-contact
Tommy.
sport. Oh, and what was his injury? His was crazy.
Yeah, he was running for a frisbee and crashed into another guy and broke
Full
eight
speed.
bones in his
That's
face.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, had like surgery. It was really rough.
Yeah,
But that's a fluke, right?
Sure.
And even in football, they're trying to make helmets safer, right?
Yeah,
Are
I
they
would be-
taking effort
No, I mean,
to make
no,
boxing safer?
probably not. And I would be
no.
open. I
But
would be
how
open.
much safer could it get?
Well, so this is actually an interesting debate in the martial arts community. I'm open to the idea that headgear that can actually protect you should be a requirement. However, a lot of people, and I think I'm probably among them, would say that you actually are more likely to get hit harder if you're more likely to get hurt if you're wearing headgear for two reasons. One, because your opponent is more likely probably is likely to use more force. They think they can safely. One, and two, because it does severely restrict your peripheral vision.
Oh, it's true too,
When
yeah.
one of my martial arts again was weaponry based, we had these padded kind of stick type weapons, and we had this headgear that was very tight laced plastic, like face shields, so you wouldn't. And like I'm always made the kids wear it, but when I sparred, I preferred not to because I mean it really narrowed your vision to almost nothing. And I was like I'm probably not gonna get blinded. Like I would wear like goggles type like a protect like a shooting glasses type thing, you know,
Mhm.
so I won't go blind. But otherwise, like what's the worst injury I could get from this? You know what I mean? And look, I've been on the wrong side of the safety question, for sure, martial arts wise. And I got like a bad cut under my eye this year from doing martial arts, right?
Is
So,
that the worst you've gotten, or have you gotten broken bones?
I
or
broke a toe once, not because I was sparring though, because we were
tripped on a boken?
No, we have this throw called a puder kapala. It's a head turn throw. So you do a full 360, and someone did it on me just to demonstrate it. My little toe got caught between the mats.
Ow!
Yeah, no, it hurt.
I bet that hurt like crazy.
Oh, it hurt a lot. This one actually, ironically, a seminarian did this last one to me. We were at the seminary and we were sparring with these padded sticks I have, and I just ducked at the wrong time, and he hit me right underneath my left eye.
Oh.
And split it open, just perfect like corner of the weapon hit me, split it open, all swelled. It was a whole thing. Looked pretty cool though. I have to say, look pretty cool.
And that's what we're going for.
Oh yeah, always.
Cool looks.
Looking cool in
Yep.
seminary.
Okay, look, I
With
mean, I think that
injuries.
there are good arguments in favor of the idea that boxing, specifically boxing might be immoral. I think though that like people watching it, like I don't watch it for blood. If I were to watch it, it wouldn't be as a blood sport thing. I think that you can appreciate the art of it, you know, as a spectator. And maybe professional boxing would be more moral if the intensity was dialed back, or if there's a point system, which I think there might be in some cases. I'm not super familiar with boxing.
I don't know. I don't really
I'm
follow it.
not
but-
super familiar with Western boxing, quad Western boxing, but
Yeah.
How about this? What would men do if there weren't boxing? You know, because I'm just trying to say
Play
there's
baseball?
this innate I don't know that it's
Violence?
a desire, but
To fight.
yeah, to fight. So
Sure.
there's a
Yeah,
way
I
to
mean,
fight where you have weight classes and you train and you're taught how to do movements and how to block yourself, right? So it's making fighting as safe as it could be,
And as fair as it
right?
can be, right? Because again, you're not
Yeah,
getting a 300-pound guy fighting a 120-pound guy,
right.
or a 6-foot guy fighting like a 4.5-foot guy or something like that.
yeah. In no way am I saying all violence is intrinsically immoral, because yeah, wrestling and tussling and those kind of self-defense things I think are great. But
Also throwing a punch is kind of innate,
yeah, but is that good? Or is
right?
that something we have
It's
to
like
overcome
it's
with
just
the help of Christ, you know?
Throwing punches.
Yeah. I mean, sleeping
and-
around with 10 women is also innate, but I mean, with Christ,
Yeah.
that's got to be controlled.
I mean, obviously you mean punching other people, because like punching a bag is fine, I would say.
I'll punch you back. You do whatever you want. Yeah. Punch a wall. I don't care.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just don't punch your little sister, you know? But
Yeah, I mean, I do think that one of the useful aspects of martial arts is that it imposes a moral framework on violence, onto the gender that is more likely just to be violent. You know what I mean? And so, when you have, like, we would have students, there was very much a clear thing of like, this martial arts is not for you to go like hurt people for no reason. It's not for you to bully people. It's not for you to hurt your siblings. And when you're in here, like, there are rules. It's not for you to hurt your classmates. And I mean, I remember one of the, I've made there are two times I remember distinctly yelling so loudly, like my throat hurt afterwards when I was teaching martial arts. And one of them was because a very high rank got frustrated in the middle of a boxing match and threw an elbow at his opponent. And thank God it missed. But those are illegal in our sport for a reason, because they're very dangerous. And I really lost my mind on this kid for a minute. And I was like you're about to be a black belt and you're throwing an elbow at this guy's face. You could seriously hurt him. He's half your size. So my point is that I think it is useful to have a moral framework to govern the use of violence, because I don't think that it's inherently like more moral to be incapable of violence. You know what I mean?
well,
Like,
I think there's that virtue of meekness, which is so often misunderstood because it's thought of as like you're a little mouse,
Right.
Not ever standing up. But meekness is having strength under control,
Yeah.
right? So you have this passion, this capacity to do real damage, and you know how to use it well
right.
at the right time, the right place, the right person,
And also you know how to use it with restraint. Like, this is not talking about boxing, but talking more about the practice of martial arts, which is something that I'm much more familiar with. But one of the benefits of it is it teaches you how to diffuse a violent situation with violence, but in a much safer way.
right.
So as if someone were to pull a knife on an untrained person, right, their only response would be to like hit him over the head with like a bat or something, or to
Yeah.
punch them until they went unconscious. Now I know the good chance I get stabbed in this process or something like that, but because it's inherently a dangerous activity. But I have training on how to broach the gap, disarm the person, lock them, maybe choke them until they're unconscious, but then let them go so that they're that's not going to cause a concussion. I mean, that's just like a loss of consciousness so that you diffuse the situation. So it gives you the ability to choose a much more peaceful resolution actually than is available to you if you have no idea what you're doing. You know what I mean?
And insofar as someone has that, then that's very laudable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a great thing of martial arts. And even when I took Taekwondo, which I know you think is
Yeah,
silly and
dancing,
girly,
Yeah,
but
I never said girly.
but we would spar gently,
Yeah.
with one another, and I would never spar girls. That was kind of my rule. But
That was your line in the sand.
what?
That was your line in the
That was
sand.
my line in the sand, yeah. But even sparring, the whole thing was, you're right. It's diffusing the situation. It's not escalating. It's not, which I think is a little different than boxing. But anyway,
But yeah, I take your point. I'm not sure that I totally agree with it still, but I think that there are valid arguments to make
But
on
we're
behalf of it.
we're gonna let our listeners decide. We're not actually gonna give you an answer, because you're right. The church has not said anything specific, but now you've heard arguments pro and con, and Lauren's on Joe's side. I can't believe it.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
She's
would
on
you
my side.
just do the WWJD thing? So classic. I mean, clearly Jesus would.
I
not
also can't picture
box.
Jesus wrestling though.
He wouldn't box anybody.
I can't picture Jesus doing a lot of things. Doesn't mean they're all
You don't
immoral.
think Jesus would wrestle?
I mean, what evidence we have that he would?
If Jesus had a little buddy, like a little brother, when
mean-
he was like a little, I mean, obviously didn't, okay, but like a cousin, maybe John the Baptist, maybe they had like a wrestling match, and that's cool.
Maybe they box. I mean, I don't know. Like, I just, it's not like it's. Yeah, I don't think that test is like as helpful in the situation as you maybe do. There's a lot of things I can't picture Jesus driving a car. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of things I can't picture him doing necessarily.
I could picture Mary driving a car. You know what car would it be? It would be a
Minivan?
Fiat.
Oh.
Nice.
But you know, the apostles, they were all in one accord.
That seems a good wrapping up point.
And on that note, Thank you for joining us on this episode of Restless. You can find us on 1350 AM, 103.9 FM. And Joe's just going to leave or maybe fight me afterwards. Maybe. I'm not sure. But you can.
Wouldn't be fair. You only know Taekwondo.
Ooh, wow. Let's go. I'm going to meet you out in the parking lot afterwards.
Great.
Because I'll drive over you.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I'll
look both ways before I cross.
Exactly. Anyway, we don't advocate violence on this show or any show.
No.
But anyway, thank you for joining us in this episode of Restless.
Of the martial arts kind.
Martial arts kind. Yeah, it's all good.
I don't advocate senseless violence.
No, not senseless violence, right. So anyway.
Sensible violence.
Yeah. Subscribe to us on YouTube and look us up on Spotify and other such things. Have a great day. God bless.